Assalamu alaikum everybody, I hope you're doing well. Today's video we're going to go over perfect squares factorization. Now in a previous video we already went over perfect squares expansion. So if you missed that one, I encourage you to check it out. I can put the link to it in the description. But basically the idea of that video was if you have a binomial that you want to square. So let's say we have the following binomial. We have x plus y. And this is a binomial because it contains two terms, right? A binomial is basically an expression that contains two terms. So here we have the two terms, x and y, so it's a binomial. All right? So let's say we want to square this. And squaring just means we're going to multiply it by itself. Is there a fast and efficient way we can do that? Well, I think there is, right? All we got to do is we square the first term that we have, and our first term is x. So we square the first term. And then we're going to add to that 2 times the first term times the second term. So 2 times the first term, which is x, times the second term, which is y. And then finally, we're going to add to that the second term squared, so y squared. All right, and that's it. That's perfect squares expansion. What about perfect squares factorization? What if we want to factorize this expression over here? Now, we already know that it factorizes into this, but how do we know? Well, let's assume we haven't seen this. How do we know how to factorize this? Well, there is a nice way. All right, so let me just first remove all this at the top. And okay, so there is a really nice pattern we can observe here. And the pattern is, are there the first question we got to ask ourselves here is, are there two things that are being squared? Well, yes, we have x squared and we have y squared, right? So we have two things. We have x that's being squared and we have y that's being squared. So I'm going to open brackets here and I'm going to put the first thing that's being squared. Put x squared, right? And then plus, I'm going to skip the middle part for now and I'm going to come back to it later. Skip over to y squared. What is the second thing that's being squared? It's the y. Right, so y squared. Now, the next question, and that's the last question we got to ask ourselves, is this middle term 2 times the first term that's being squared times the second term that's being squared? And the answer is yes, right? This middle term is 2 times the first term that's being squared, which is x, times the second term that's being squared, which is y. And that's all we need to know to, that's all we need to consider to know how to factorize this, all right? All we got to do now is we open up our brackets and we look at the two terms that are inside all of these brackets, right? What are the only two terms that are inside all of these brackets over here? They're just x and y, and both of them are positive. So x plus y. I can put a plus x here, but it's not gonna change anything, right? By default, it's considered a positive. All right, and we're gonna square it, and that is it. That is basically it. That's all we have to do. All right. Now this might have been a little bit complicated because we have variables here and not numbers. So let's try an example, and hopefully the example will drive the point home. All right. Let's factorize x squared plus 10x plus 25. So, and by the way, I've created a form that we could use to do perfect squares factorization. So let's use this over here, and I'm going to walk you through how we can use it. All right, so now let's ask ourselves our two questions. The first question is, are there two things that are being squared? Well, I see something that's being squared. There's an x that's being squared, so I'm going to put an x over here. Let's now jump over to the 25. Is 25 a square number? What number do we multiply by itself to get 25? And there are two answers to that. There's 5. 5 times 5 is 25. And negative 5 times negative 5 is also 25, right? Because the negatives cancel each other out, so we get 25. So which one do we put here? Well, you could try it. Let's try the 5 first. Let's see if the 5 works. Now, our second question is, it's looking good so far. Our second question is the middle term, which is 10x, is it 2 times our first term, that's being squared, which is x, times our second term? Well, maybe. Let's do that. Let's multiply 2 by x and by 5. Is 10x this thing over here? Well, yes, it is, right? Because this is 2 times 5. 2 times 5 gives me the 10 that I want, and there is an x. So this thing is 10x. And so that's all I need to know. Now I know how to factorize this. This is basically going to be, what are the two terms that are inside all those brackets? Well, there are 2, right? X and 5. And they're both positive. So I'm going to put x plus 5. And I'm going to square this. And that is basically it. All right? So I hope that example made it a little bit simpler. We're going to do one more. So let me just remove this. Let's now factorize x squared minus 14x plus 49. All right, and let's use the form that I've created again. Okay, again, we go for our first question. What is, not what is, are there two terms that are being squared? Well, I see something that's being squared. There's an x that's being squared, so I'm putting an x here. Let's jump over to the 49. Is 49 a square number? Well, yes, it is. What do we multiply? Which number do we multiply by itself to get 49? There are two numbers, right? 7 and negative 7. 7 times 7 is 49. Negative 7 times negative 7 is also 49. So which one do we put here? Now, we could try both numbers and see what works, but usually, I mean, a good way to know is we look at the middle term. Now, the middle term is negative, right? We have negative 14x. And notice here we are going to multiply 2 times x, right? And x is positive. So how do I get a negative? I need to multiply by something negative over here, right, to get my negative 14x. Otherwise, this would be positive if we multiply by a positive. And so this must be a negative 7. Otherwise, we just get a positive number here, or a positive term, which we do not want. All right, so the negative 7 is going to do the work. So let's multiply here by negative 7. Is negative 14x 2 times our first term times our second term? Is it 2 times x times negative 7? And the answer is yes, right? Negative 14x to get our negative 14, we're going to multiply 2 times negative 7. So that's good for a negative 14. And then we have an x to get our negative 14x. And that is exactly what we want. Now we know how to factorize this. Right, there are two terms inside those brackets. There are x and negative 7. So I'm going to combine them both, x and negative 7, and I'm going to square this, and that is basically it. All right, so I hope that example made it simpler. Trust me, guys, with practice, you're gonna nail this. It's gonna be a lot more easier. So that's it. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below, and I'll try to get back to you. And that's it. I hope I made it simple. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you next time.